Hello everyone, it's GigaBeef here, and today we're going to revisit the MP7 in patch 12.12 because I've been loving this gun as much as ever. The MP7 is an absolute beast of a weapon in CQB because of a combination of two things: amazing ammo that hits beautiful breakpoints, along with the rate of fire which at 950 is in the top few weapons in the game. Given it's still accessible on the fleet as of the time of recording, it's very cheap when compared to other similar use case guns such as the P90. However, there are downsides, primarily being high MOA, which affects accuracy at range, relatively high recoil for an SMG style firearm, and difficulty in sourcing magazines at early trader levels. Starting at the beginning, there are two versions of the MP7, the A1 and the A2. The difference between them is that the A1 has an integrated folding foregrip, whereas the A2 has a rail instead that can take a foregrip of your choice. Given that they both have the same recoil and ergo at stock, the A2 is strictly better given any foregrip you add will make it better than the A1. Naturally, as you might imagine, this makes the A2 slightly more expensive than the A1 is. As both weapons have similar stats, decent ergo, and the fact that recoil reducing attachments just don't really do much to these weapons with low starting recoil, I often find myself drawn to the A1 for the extra value. I do love a bit of value, it's true. There are two Barters for the MP7 from the traders, one for the A1 and one for the A2. The A1 is a fairly sweet version on Mechanic 1 with suppressor, 40 round mag, aim point reflex and a tactical device. However, for 5 working LCDs and a Nixor lens, this comes out to about 210k. This is cheaper than buying all these parts off the fleet if you don't have access to them on the traders directly, but I wouldn't be paying over 200,000 for this weapon to begin with. The Peacekeeper 4 barter for the A2 for a broken G-Phone X and a power bank unfortunately suffers from the G-Phones being really expensive at the moment, so this is far cheaper on the flea market. As far as modding goes, the A1 has everything you need to shred people in CQB and nothing more. If you want to use it as cheaply as possible, you can literally add a magazine and that's it. With the stock in its extended position, it has a recoil of 51 as standard because the compensator always comes with this gun and there aren't any other loud muzzles. There was a trend recently of players taking off the rear sight to give a clearer sight picture, and because the game knows where the centre of the front sight is without the rear sight, despite this not working in real life, it gave quite a nice view for target acquisition at close range. Give it a go yourself, it does seem to work pretty well for close quarters areas like factory or dorms where you'd rather have the clear open vision rather than specific precision. This means that the weapon is pretty much 30 to 40k from the fleet and usable. Honestly, I think this is an incredible bargain for what you get here. If you want to do something a little more fancy, you can add a laser or a flashlight onto the pre-installed side rails and any holographic or reflex on the top. The meta version includes the suppressor, however unlike the weapon, this is extremely expensive at 59k from Mechanic 4 and even higher on the flea. If you're going to use the suppressor, given it's so expensive, you may as well move up to the MP7A2. You can get this down to 52 recoil, but there's not really much point doing this as you lose so much ergonomics using the RK2. Best in slot wise, you're better off using the Cobra for a swing of 17 ergo at the expense of 2 recoil. Then add a laser and an optic of your choice. Now, we have to pick a magazine for the weapon. Here is the usual sticking point for the MP7, the magazines just aren't accessible at lower level traders. The 20 rounders can be acquired from either Mechanic 1 or Peacekeeper 3, but the 30 rounders are locked to Mechanic 3 and the 40 rounders to Mechanic 4. It is possible to use the weapon with 20 round mags, but due to the fire rate the MP7 eats ammunition like crazy. For comparison, it takes 1.26 seconds to empty a 20 rounder with the MP7 versus 2.25 seconds for a 30 rounder in an M4 and 3 seconds for a 30 rounder in an AKM. Obviously the upside to this is that the MP7 has crazy time to kill, the downside is if you miss, your opponent's still shooting at you. The 20 rounders do have some small benefits in that they give +2 ergonomics versus -1 and -4 of the 30s and the 40s, as well as only taking up one slot in your rig. However, I don't think this outweighs the difficulty when getting into extended firefights. Clearly the 40s are optimal, but the 30s are totally usable, which means you can either wait until Mechanic 3 at level 30, or alternatively buy one 30 round mag from the fleet, use that in the gun with 20s in reserve to reload. However, 30 rounders from the fleet are typically still 20 to 30k, so I'm just not sure if it's worth it. On to the ammo. This is the main reason why this weapon is such a beast in the first place. There are only 4 rounds available for the MP7, and this is the only weapon that uses them. I would advise against using Action SX because it has low penetration and you'll struggle to even pen class 3 armor. However, the next step up is to Subsonic, which is actually a decent round. With 36 penetration, it's comparable to many other rounds at 37 pen, namely the best round SS190 for the P90, BT for the 545 AKs and also M856A1 for the 556 weapons. 36 pen is 46% chance, so slightly lower to beat class 4 on the first shot, but with the number of rounds fired from this gun, we can take that figure more liberally than on a semi-weapon like the RFB for example. As the name suggests, Subsonic is a slow round designed to move lower than the speed of sound, travelling at 290 meters per second, which in theory makes it harder to take longer range shots, but the MP7 isn't suited to this anyway with its horrible accuracy rating of around 8 MOA. The primary benefit for this round given this is the -22 recoil, which makes a massive difference to how the recoil pattern handles on the MP7, as well as a touch more damage at 45 than the others with good pen values. Given the much higher recoil across the board in 12-12, and with high rate of fire weapons taking the brunt of this pain, being able to mitigate the 50 recoil on this weapon is a godsend without losing too much performance or paying for the suppressor. This is possibly the reason that they were restricted to trader only and banned from the Flea. Next up is FMJ, which is another great round. With 43 damage and 40 pen, it cleanly breaks through the 37-ish breakpoint, which leads to an 87% chance to pen class 4 on the first hit, which is amazing. This is available on Peacekeeper 3, but also on the Flea. However, I wouldn't spend the 1000 plus rubles per round for this on the market, and instead just use other weapons until you can get it from the traders yourself. Not that it matters that much, but both variants of the MP7 are calibrated for 0 based on this round, and with a speed of 620 meters per second at medium distance should make it easier to hit shots than with the Subsonics. The last round, APSX, used to be the fully kitted Chad Slayer type round for this weapon, but with its removal on the flea market and no availability on the traders and no crafts for it either, it's basically ceased to exist in 12-12. It used to be good for the chance to 3-shot class 5 armor and dramatically reduced the rounds required to kill class 6 wearers too. However, this type of player is so much rarer now, it's not as useful as it once was either. So really, the choice is between the FMJ rounds and the Subsonics, but which are the best? Despite both having enough damage to technically 2-tap the 85 damage thorax hitbox, a combination of distance drop off even at short range and damage mitigation from class 4 armor, even on a penetration, means that these two rounds will very rarely 2-tap players wearing armor better than class 3. One interesting point to note is that both have 20% fragmentation chance, meaning broadly that 1 in 5 rounds will deal 50% bonus damage, so the average damage is more like 49.5 for Subsonic and 47.3 for FMJ. The team over at Tarkov Ballistics have been doing some work on a new table of shots to 85 damage at 30 meters, which is really interesting. It's still being worked on, but this shows the average rounds to kill versus thorax shots for all ammo against a variety of armor in each class. This shows an interesting result, that because the subsonic ammo has just that little bit more damage, versus class 2 it actually can 2-tap because the armor mitigation is much smaller for these armors than for class 4. FMJ simply doesn't have enough damage, with 2 rounds only dealing 86 potential when they come right out of the barrel, meaning that often the total falls below 85. Against class 4, FMJ does outperform due to its higher pen, but the difference appears to be 50-50 3-tap versus 4-taps, whereas subsonic 4-taps most of the time. Whether this offsets the recoil reduction from the subsonic rounds, making you feel like you can hit that half a shot more per engagement, is up to you, and will be the deciding factor as to which is best in your raids. As a reminder, you can load 3 to 4 rounds of subsonic in the top of your mags with FMJ underneath if you want to help with the initial recoil. Because these rounds are so close in performance, this is actually a serious consideration to help with the initial burst, unlike other calibers with badly performing subsonic rounds. In terms of kit that you want to pair with this, because you're going to be in close quarters with your opponents, I would typically suggest something with decent durability at class 4 that covers the whole torso. You're most at risk to shotguns, whether it be Magnum, Flechette or other buckshot, especially to the stomach, and full auto SMGs and rifles. The ANA Tactical M2 is a strong choice at Ragman 3 with its really cheap barter, which genuinely can be under 50k if you buy the components at the right time, and the 6B3TM, i.e. the Rat Rig, if you only have Ragman 2, also fits the bill for budget and protection. Because this weapon is really quite cheap, we don't usually want to spend too much on the rest of the kit in its unsuppressed configuration. As much as I love the new MMAC rig that I usually recommend, its lack of stomach protection makes it a bit less compelling, and the cheap level 5s don't quite have enough durability against rounds like BT in CQB. You can probably get away with the Gazelle, but with the Karun's lowest in class durability and minus 18% speed debuff, I'd advise against it. You really want to be manoeuvrable to get the most out of the MP7. If you're playing on factory and want a face shield to save you from the 9mm pistol boys, you can grab either a 40k class 3 Kiver plus face shield using the chainlet barter for the main helmet, or a 55k ZSH-12M and face shield, which is class 4 on the helmet and class 3 on the face shield. But do remember that even 25 pen weapons like the UMP with match FMJ will have just under 40% chance to pen class 3 on the first hit, which does make the ZSH seem a little pricey and the Kiver just a protection against 9mm and shotguns outside of Flechette. The final topic today is on insurance. The MP7 has a problem with insurance returns, which is how it folds down into 2 slots. Taking off the suppressor, folding down the stock, and removing the mag makes it very tiny and it fits into practically anyone's storage, pretty much ensuring that you won't ever get it back against players unless you're incredibly lucky. The MP7 is genuinely one of my favourite weapons in Tarkov after reaching Mechanic 3. With both cheap, powerful ammo and the gun itself also cheap with 0 required mods, I hope you have as much fun with it as I do. As usual, if you learned something, please consider dropping a like and a comment. To see what I'm streaming, you can follow me on Twitter and Twitch. Check out our ScavTalk podcast in the links below, and with all that said, I'll see you next time, and as always, have fun in your raids.